The public will be permitted for entirely remote meetings, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time and via technological means on Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28, or Charter Channel 192, or on www.youtube.com/Westborough TV. However, in the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So welcome, everybody. We have two guests tonight, Town Manager Christy Williams and Finance Director Leah Talbot. The first order of business is approval of the minutes of January 24th. There are no minutes for the budget summit of last week available. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of January 24th?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the 24th.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? A roll call vote. Melanie, you will start us off because Beth is out.
Ford, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Eagle, abstain.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Vic, yes.
Moretti, yes.
701.
Okay. So, Christy, I know you have some slides tonight, and let me see if I can figure out the technology and share my screen with you.
Oh, it's letting me share.
Good, good.
Oops.
Did I lose it?
I think you are sharing right now, so you need to stop sharing and then I'll be able to share.
Yep. Okay. Hang on, there we go.
Okay. So do you want to take up the OPEB funding schedule
Yeah,
first?
we'd like to do that first. And then if you and Leah are amenable, we'd like to talk about some of the budget slash articles.
Sure. So this is the OPEB, so this is a comprehensive fiscal management policy. It was approved several years ago, and it's been, it gets reviewed annually. And one of the goals, as I mentioned at the budget summit for this year, was to create an OPEB funding schedule, which the town has never had before. We did used to fund OPEB from 2014 to fiscal 2020 at 1.1 million. And that number came from the savings that was recognized when we made some health plan design changes in 2014. So obviously that funding, which was in our budget, was pulled from the budget due to the impacts of COVID. And so the intention was to start to put this back into the budget incrementally so as not to have a significant impact in one fiscal year to the taxpayer. Last year we did fund through free cash $600,000. And then you all approved, following that, you all voted to support, and then the select board approved this funding schedule, which considered at the time increasing the budget by $150,000 a year, but also making up that 1.1 million using free cash or other grant funds, because we believed that we would be able to use ARPA funding for the balance. And so since hiring Clifton Larson Allen, we have been advised not to use ARPA money for that purpose. And so given that loss of a potential available fund, we're recommending that we take a look at the funding schedule again before it's used in fiscal 23, and to update it to something that we think is reasonable given that ARPA funding is unavailable. So I had proposed at the budget summit that we would continue to leave $150,000 in the RNA or in the budget. Based on conversations on Tuesday with our finance team, which makes up Mike, is made up by your chair, Mike Brady, myself, and town side finance staff, and then also the superintendent, chair of the school committee, and school side finance staff. This is sort of the recommendation that we ended up with. And so we wanted to show it to you because the select board is going to take this up on Tuesday night. So it doesn't change all of the pieces of the OPEB, but it does change the funding schedule. Where in FY23, we would fund $200,000 of free cash and then not put it into the budget until FY24. 200,000 would go into the budget, and then we would increase incrementally the RNA by $200,000 a year, and then stay steady at the $200,000 of free cash every year until fiscal 28. We would drop it to 100,000, and then in fiscal 29, we would not be using alternative funding sources, and it would be fully in the budget. So, happy to answer any questions, myself or Leah.
Don't wait, guys. Go ahead. Anybody's
Okay.
Walter, then Andrew.
Okay. Hi. So I just want to get the lay of the land here, though. The OPEB itself is money. The reason we're behind is over many, many years, we had employees who are entitled to these benefits, out in the future. And we did not collect money during those years to support these other post-employment benefits.
No, the town's not behind. This is OPEB, and I have to have Leah help me, but it's been in recent years that the town has been required to have an actuary identify the OPEB liability. And so prior to that, and Leah, jump in with the year that you think that may have happened. There was go ahead.
So that was, I want to say it was probably somewhere around 10 years ago. The GASB made municipalities, local governments all across, obviously, the United States, that's the GASB. And they basically, up until that point, the liability for OPEB wasn't on our balance sheets. And in private sector, that liability obviously has always been on the balance sheets. And so for transparency, they had everyone go out, and every other year we have to have an actuary come out and perform an audit to tell us what our new liability is. Liability changes every single year, obviously. And then they do an interim adjustment mid-year for that number. And so that's the reason for the liability showing up now when no one really paid attention to it before. It's always been there. The premise of it, and I think, I don't know if you were on the board when we discussed this the last time, Walter, but basically the premise is that, for instance, we'll pick on Christy because he's so pick onable. So Christy's here, she's working for you. She's performing services as the town manager. And at the same time, she's accruing a benefit when she retires for health insurance. And so the premise is that you are paying for her services and receiving her services, and therefore you should be paying for all of the costs of her services. So that's kind of the premise of it. We're not behind. There's no requirement to fund OPEB, but it is a best practice, obviously, to start that process. I can tell you that as of the end of the year, we now have $10 million in our OPEB trust, so we're on our way. So that, I hope that answers your question a little bit, Walter.
Yeah, well, I wasn't so much the requirement. To me, it's more if you're going to hire employees and give them future benefits, if you don't pay for those future benefits, or at least start investing in those future benefits now, you're leaving that cost to some future town resident who didn't derive benefit from those employees. So, I mean, it seems like the true cost of employee is, and I guess we're in a similar boat with retirement sort of too, I guess. But
Right, but there is a requirement.
So I'm perfectly in favor of doing this. I'm just concerned. I've heard some comments about people not wanting to do this, and I think it's I think I think the right idea is to start working down on this.
Right. I think that if I'm looking at Paul, but I think it was Paul that said the last time we discussed this, though, the nuance of it is that because 10 years ago, we didn't pay for a service for an employee that's now retired, the taxpayer is paying for the service of a person that they didn't get service from because they're retired, plus the service that they're getting, plus, future services. So Paul, if that wasn't you, correct me, but I think you're shaking your head that basically because we're funding it, the person that's funding it's kind of getting stuck with it all, but that's unfortunate, I guess.
Well, and also, it's also in preparation for when we expect to be required to fund it. So, we'll be in a better situation than other communities that have not started funding it or haven't funded it at the level that we have. So, and to Walter's point, another portion of this, which we're not looking to amend, but was approved, is that every time we add a employee, we add $5,000 to the budget. And so when we add a new position, and so that's sort of getting to what you're saying. Obviously 5,000 doesn't cover it, but that's we're working towards that.
Okay, and one other question, if I might. So every year now we must actually pay some amount for this insurance. Does it just go in the insurance budget, or where's that show up for the past employees?
Yeah, so we pay our retiree benefits out of our insurance budget. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Called pay. It's basically called pay as you go, because obviously the retirees have health insurance and the bill comes in and that's what we pay it out of. It's the insurance budget. That health insurance line that you see, that $11 million is for obviously town and school employees that are active, but also the retirees.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew lost his audio and he's going to dial back in. Is there another hand up, because I'm not seeing it on my screen?
Hank and Melanie.
Okay, Hank.
Yeah, a lot of industrials over the recent years have gone from a defined benefit approach to a defined contribution approach for these post-employment benefit type benefits. Is that something that we could consider or think about doing?
I'm not sure I understand.
Defined benefit, defined contribution program is where for each year of service, you put aside an amount of money into a savings account or an account that becomes vested when the employee retires.
There are some.
It limits your future liability to what's in the fund.
So we have to fund at least 50% of the retirees' health benefits. But what you're talking about, some towns are looking toward doing, which is contributing to some of that cost now, and that would have to be negotiated.
Yeah, I mean, okay. It's part of the union contract as opposed to it's not a legal mandate by the state. It's part of our union contract.
Well, we've accepted a statute that requires us to fund retiree benefits at 50%.
Okay.
Melanie?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm kind of piggybacking onto his question, but if you discuss the 5,000 that's put in automatically for a new hire, does a person have to be vested? Do they have to serve so many years with the town to be eligible for this benefit? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
10 years, I believe. At least 10 years.
Yeah, 10, it's a combination of age and years of service, depending on how old you are. But yeah, you have to be vested. Yep.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Hi, I apologize. My audio dropped out, so if I'm going to ask something that has already been asked, then feel free to tell me to be quiet, and I'll just catch the notes. But I had two quick questions. Is OPED currently a fund that is being withdrawn on in addition to being added to? So is there a break-even amount? So everything we're adding in is purely additive at this time, right?
Correct.
Right.
And I remember as a second question, thank you. Second question, I remember the conversation being that we were going to benefit by having a plan that specifically spelled out the fact that we have a funding schedule that we're aiming for. Is there any reason we settle on going for the 1-1 versus settling on, say, $800,000 with a plan to potentially add up to $300,000 more on an ongoing basis to give us a little more flexibility with our spending?
We, for 5 or 6 years, we funded at that 1.1. And so, we were wanting to work back up to that. I mean, as I said, that number came from the savings from the health plans design changes. It's not even close to our annual required contribution. So I would not advocate for funding it less.
Thank you.
Zafar?
Yeah, hi. Just a comment more than a question is, in the more than a year I've been on this, when I see one more position is added, whether it's school or police or anything else, we just highlight the salary. I think it should be a practice to highlight the salary, benefits, and this OPEB cost and as an estimate of a new position. So everybody can see that the salary is not the only cost of adding a position to any of the town departments.
Comment, Christy or Leah?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, it's fair. Certainly we don't know who's going to take in certain benefits or not, but I think your comment is as a fair comment. So,
which I think is part of the reason why we added that one point, that one bullet in this funding schedule with the $5,000. We felt like it was important to say, okay, we're funding it, but we've got to recognize that every new person adds to that liability.
Zafar is really touching on a point that we've been making for a while, and I know you guys have been responsive, but we've got to really capture what the true costs are for not only new hires, but, we talked a little bit at the summit about what's the real cost of educating students, et cetera. I think it's important that we come up with a process that allows that to happen so that this committee and the taxpayers can see that information, so they have a real complete picture of what they're paying for. Because with the town picking up the cost of benefits and the school picking up the cost of hiring and then everything in between, and it's not just the school system, it's all of our employees. We really need to get a much clearer picture on this kind of information. Okay, that was my comment. Any other questions?
Can I just respond to that for a second? So I think that the word true cost is difficult because, for instance, you might have a police officer that doesn't take the town's health insurance, and so therefore his or her costs are a lot different than a similar police officer that's working side by side with that person that has a family plan. So it's difficult. I mean, we certainly could do some kind of average, but it's difficult I'm just focusing on the word true cost.
Okay, I understand that because, at least come to some agreement on I don't call it whatever you want, average or identifiable percentage that can at least be attributable to that particular, to that class of employees.
Yeah, I was going to say, it has to be a class of employees or, because otherwise a percentage of, you know, a high administrator, say the principal, is going to be a lot less than a custodian's percentage. So,
Sure.
Because they both get the same benefits, they both get, you know, are entitled to, say, family plan health insurance. A percentage of a lower paid employee is going to be a lot higher than the percentage of a higher paid employee.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, I personally, I'm not looking for you to come down to the penny on everything, but we should at least have a reasonably good understanding of what the costs are in these particular areas that we're talking about. Okay. Any other questions for Christy and Leah on this particular item?
Yeah, if I may, and
Yes.
Christy, I'm sorry I didn't follow up with this when you said it at first, and it just sort of marinated in my mind. You said at the 1.1 million, we're not coming close to covering what our accrued costs are, or you used a term, and I'm sorry, I'm not getting it exactly, but are we falling behind further and further on our OPEB liabilities, even at $1.1 million?
Yeah, so the actuary identifies both our total liability and then our ARC, and our ARC, that's ARC, so that's annual required contribution. It's not 1.1 million, it's more than that. So, you know, I'm not aware of many communities that are fully funded in OPEB or that fully fund their ARC, because that is a significant number. I'd have to, Leah, I don't know if you have it in front of you, probably not.
I don't, I
didn't think so.
No, but I want to say that it's close, somewhere in the neighborhood of almost, I'm thinking $3 million.
Yeah. So I don't want to use the terms fall behind or lagging behind, or, you know, I think we need to remember that the full OPEB portion of the policy also speaks to redirecting money once we've fully funded our pension liability. And so, you know, I think this is the things that we put in place, you know, are sort of reflective of the fact that 1.1 million has been a space that the town has historically funded. And that's something that we want to get back to, because we think that, you know, is reasonable. And we also want to, you know, show, you know, the bond rating agencies that we're getting back to that. But then also, it's also respectful of the fact that, you know, there are plans for the future. And so, I don't want to say that we're lagging behind.
Okay, thank you. I will try and be more careful of the words. I understand the reason of the negativity. I will say, though, that, you know, we want to fund it at this level because we've always done it that way. At the same time, we're also saying that whether it was 1.1 million or 800,000, we're still way behind that ARC number. It just seems that we're painting something as something we should aspire to when it's just a nice to have number. And I think that there's an arguable case for giving ourselves more flexibility potentially, you know, with the 1.1 as a goal or something. It just doesn't seem as cut and dry from what I've heard thus far, although you've explained it very, very well. So I don't take that from you. But I thank you for being able to say my piece on this.
I guess I would just say in general, if this committee or the select board is uncomfortable with any of this, I mean, I said it at the summit and I said it again on Tuesday night to the finance team. It's going to be very, very important for both the select board and the advisory finance committee to follow the funding schedule, understanding that town meeting can choose not to, but it's going to be important. I mean, we can go to our bond rating agencies and say, you know, everyone who supported the policy, approved the policy, tried to push, you know, or made this recommendation, and town meeting still voted it down. And, you know, we'll have to deal with that. But we certainly should not be putting in place a policy that we aren't planning to follow. So I'm not saying that anyone has said that. I just want to be really clear about it.
Yeah,
And
we've made tremendous progress. We've gone from ignoring the subject to paying attention to it, to trying to do something about it. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We got to run the 5K before we train for the marathon.
Leah?
Oh, I just wanted to remind you all that this is a change to the funding schedule and that everyone already approved the funding schedule and we're just tweaking the funding schedule now. So it's not kind of coming out of left field. Everyone approved this last year in the fall. And so this is just changing it to understand that we can't use ARPA.
Okay.
Right.
Walter, I see you have your hand up, but just, Leah, just to respond, quick question. And Christy, what are you expecting from us tonight? Do you want some approval before it goes to the select board? Some,
Typically, this committee would vote their support of the amendment to the comprehensive fiscal management policy.
Walter?
Yes, he made a good case for the reason for this change was there was some vision of using ARPA funding for a big chunk of the left column. But I guess that my main question is, since we're modifying this, having just modified it maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, was there any thought to not detailing it out with exacting numbers or something like that? Or what, I guess a better question is, why do you feel it's the correct thing to fill out a chart with actual numbers like this?
Because so that question came up at the budget summit too. And, it's because we want to be transparent with the community about how we will be increasing it in the budget. And that's that R&A portion. So, I think it's important. I think it's important that if it's being supported and approved by two boards, that they recognize how we're going to get to the total number. And so that's why it's detailed out this way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
My thinking, we don't have to do this now, folks. We could vote on this on Monday, or we can vote on it tonight. And I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Let's vote on it tonight.
Well, can I get a show of hands? All in favor of voting on it tonight, please? Just click on your raised hands thing.
Oh.
Just go to participants and raise your hands. Okay, it looks like we have a majority in favor of.
I don't know how the heck to get my hand up.
That's okay. Oh, I got it, Tom. Yeah, there it is. Thumbs up. Okay, so we'll vote on it after we're finished with our discussions. Christy, I'd like to just keep moving forward.
Does that mean that there's no other questions?
I'm going to ask.
On this. So just, I guess my question is to make a motion for this. It would be to adopt the comprehensive fiscal management policies as written in, is there a certain draft?
It would just be a motion to support the amended comprehensive fiscal management policy.
Okay.
You know what? Why don't we go ahead, folks, since there is a majority in favor of voting on this, vote on it right now.
So Mike, I move the Finance Committee recommend that the Select Board adopt the policy as presented here by the town manager.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. Melanie?
Board, yes.
Andrew?
So we might have lost his sound again. I don't see his telephone.
Dolan, yes.
Okay. Paul?
Eagle, yes. Yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Siddiqui, yes.
Moretti, yes. Okay, Christy, you have,
Thank you.
and Bradley, Andrew voted in yes, said his audio is out again. Okay, do you have another slide to share with us?
Yes. Let's pull it up. Okay. So this is a slide that I showed at the budget summit. And it's also speaks to this on page 15 of your budget books in the budget message. But I just wanted to be clear and make sure that everyone is clear that the budget document recommends that a maximum of $1 million of free cash be used to lower the tax rate. So when I came to the budget, when we did the budget preview on 12/14, that number, we were anticipating an average single family increase of $1,290. The budget document anticipated an increase of $1,237, and that was the result of the changes to the budget, specifically deferrals of the personnel in the town departments. But if you use the $1 million of free cash, it was to get us down to the 1107, so the $1,107. The way that this was proposed in the budget document and also shown on this slide at the budget summit was that any savings recognized by unknown budget items be used to lower the $1 million use of free cash, and that was to try to minimize a structural deficit that we were creating. And so when I showed this to you at the budget summit on 127, we had decreased the increase to the average single family to 1,217, and that was because of the increase in state aid that when the governor's numbers came out. But we didn't. But what we actually also did was that we decreased the amount of free cash that would be used to get us to that 1107. And so with the amendment that you just voted on tonight, if that's approved by the select board, that will remove another $150,000 from the budget, which will get us to the 1,197, which decreases that $1 million again to get us to the 1107. So again, that was presented in the budget document and discussed in the budget message. It was presented at the budget summit. I'm sharing it with you again tonight so that making sure that everyone is acknowledging this, because I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So this is the slide that was shown, and this chart here was also in the budget document that shows that the $1 million of free cash over time, if you're incrementally putting it back into the budget, actually is a cost of $2.5 million. This is obviously just an example, but how I would envision we would work back into the budget and eliminate that structural deficit. And so that's why there's a benefit to reducing the amount of free cash used to lower the tax rate. And so when I talked about this on Tuesday, I was asked to provide this slide here.
Walter? Sorry, Christy.
No, I'm done. Sorry.
Okay. So I guess part of me wonders why we don't stick with the million, where we apparently are using overlay surplus to reduce our use of free cash and other things by over $1 million, because all those capital things became from a different source and not free cash. So part of me says, why not leave this at the higher number? Because otherwise I think we're collecting too much free cash again.
We're not collecting free cash, but our balance remains higher, but we're still using less money to offset operating expenses. I mean, overlay surplus, we could have not used any of it and just used free cash, and then the overlay surplus would have become free cash. So we're still talking about two reserves. And so we're putting that towards the capital. We're recommending putting that towards the capital plan. We recommended that at the summit. And so that does reduce our use of free cash, but increasing our use of free cash to offset operating expenses does not eliminate the structural, it still creates a structural deficit. So we're trying to minimize our structural deficit.
We've got to get focused on spending, not on all the accounting tricks. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to, if we want to get things under control, you got to get the spending under control. These are, you know, the proposals make sense, but we're spending too much time worrying about all the accounting tricks. We got to start spending our time worrying about how do we get the spending under control.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Hank and I are saying the same thing. I think that you know, if the town services that, you know, that we're providing have this cost and you know, using one-time revenue sources to offset those costs, that's not the true cost of the services, if that makes any sense. And so using some level of free cash to lower it was recommended, but again, trying to reduce the structural deficit, because at some point that has to come back onto into the budget.
I agree.
But to some level, the fact that we have so much free cash means we're over collecting to begin with.
That's, well, so free cash comes from multiple sources. It's not just budgets. So we have, it's revenue sources that we didn't, that we couldn't estimate. It's articles that get closed out. It's not that we're just overtaxing.
Paul?
I'm bothered by this term structural deficit because I think it's sounding like sort of an evil thing, you know, inherently. And what it's really doing is saying, you know, by keeping free cash, has come from current and past taxpayers, and by keeping it in a kitty higher than what we need it, as opposed to the small degree it does, you know, lowering taxes for next year, just in order to not have to raise them more than the following year, which is, you know, kind of politically bad to be doing it. But I guess I don't want to take any more from taxpayers than we need to. We've already taken an amount. And if that decreases what we take next year, even though it's facing a huge increase, I'd rather keep going that way and face, especially when we have this hopefully one time, if no one changes the dual tax rate situation, thing where we're giving, you know, higher taxes to residents and lower taxes to commercial. This is not the year, I think, to be, you know, relying on the structural deficit to be this word to you know, to try to stamp those out.
I'm not relying on that word. I mean, it's just the reality. We used $770,000 of free cash in FY21, and we created a structural deficit that we were unexpectedly able to remove when we got a huge increase of Chapter 70 money, and that's just not something that we can count on. So the reality is that that use of these reserves to fund operating expenses is going to create a structural deficit. It's certainly our decision. You know, it's the town's decision as to how they want to use that, but we have concerns about it related to, you know, what that's going to mean in future years and what that's going to mean for our bond rating.
The increase will be high. The structural deficit means that the percentage increase the following year will be higher than it would have otherwise been, but the tax won't be any higher. The tax will be what's needed in order to cover the expenses. So
again, we gotta get focused on.
Hang on, guys. Go ahead, Paul.
To me, we're trying to take our lumps all in 1 year, as opposed to, I think, if there's room in the money that taxpayers have already paid, rather than hoarding that, use it this year. We're still going to have the same taxes. Structural deficit just means that percentage is going to be higher, and it's going to look bad.
Okay. Zafar, and then Andrew. And then Hank, if you want to jump back in.
So my thought process was this, and I read through this, and I've heard this in the some other presentations that part of the higher taxes you're paying is because the property value is up. And I read the number between 600 and 800 average. We are higher because of the higher property values. That means is, even if the residents are same, we are collecting more money. Yes, we are collecting more money, but then our needs and expenses are building more than that, what we are collecting extra money. So I don't understand fully the whole concept, but if this year, next year, because of the $1 million, we can reduce the taxes and then try to figure out why we are spending so much. I understand the need. Every department and every of the town has a need of this, but we need to learn to live within our means. Part two of that is, which bothers me so much, is, okay, I lived in other towns as well. The actual town assessment has never been the cost of the market value. But if we are going with the market value of the property in this town, the tax assessment is close to the market value. What happens in the next few years if there's a downturn? If the market value goes down, we'll be collecting, unless the assessment will go down just because the market value is down. So, too many things to think about if raising the assessment of the property based on the market value.
Well, this goes to Hank's point. We've got to get our spending under control. And Andrew, I know you got your hand up, but Hank, is that what you were going to start?
Yeah, we just, there's two sides to this equation. There's a revenue side and there's a spending side. We've got to, the purpose of the budget is to focus on the spending side. We got to focus on the spending side. If we can't afford all the services we're asking for, we have to ask for less services. It's just like a family budget. You've got to have reserve funds because there are expenses that you had not anticipated and can't control. That's why we retain free cash. It's a reserve.
Andrew?
Only to complement what other people have sort of said, as a reminder, also looking out, this $1,100 or $1,200 that we'd be adding now, we already know that there are plans on the books for police, fire, school, all the major groups are looking to add more people. I mean, it's literally in their plan to grow. So we talk about what it is we're doing right now because it's really what we're paying for right now, but we're trying to be a town that even has more expenses than that. Than we have listed here that we know are coming down the pike, and we talk about delaying them year after year, and the departments have been very amenable to that. But the reality is, what we're talking about providing for services is even more, and it's on the books to happen. And back to what was being said before, it's about controlling the spending, and it just seems that structurally we are planning to grow even bigger than we are right now, without any plans yet to really structurally change that spending. And I don't know how we do it without reducing services somewhere.
Well, Andrew, that's a good point. But I will also say, to complement what you're saying, a lot of what we're looking at in the future is being driven by a strategic plan and being guided by our master plan. And the consequence is that we are in a position as we move forward, where we're going to be asking for more and more services. And the money just doesn't grow on trees, folks. It's an old axiom, but it's true. And we've been speaking to this for the last two town meetings in our message to the voters. We have got to start taking a hard, serious look at what we're spending. And Melanie raised this issue a couple of weeks ago when we met, the difference between what we want and what we need. And I think we're going to have to start making some really tough decisions as a town, or this is going to just continue to grow on us. And it's not just the operating departments. Any comments on what we've discussed so far? Okay, hearing none. Christy, can you do us a favor? Can you please explain the overlay surplus for those of us who are not completely familiar with it?
Sure. So overlay is raised on the recap sheet. So you don't see it in the budget. It's something that the Board of Assessors signs off on the recap sheet. We currently raise overlay at $650,000 a year. That overlay is a liability account to pay for abatements and exemptions. The money builds if it's not used. And so, every so many years, the town manager can ask the Board of Assessors to evaluate the overlay and see if there's any money to be released. And so that's something that we did in 2019. And it's something that we've just done this year. But once it goes to surplus, if we don't use it, it will go to free cash. So using it is similar to using free cash.
What's the recap sheet?
Leah, do you want to?
Well,
Yeah.
municipal finances, I don't think are the strength.
So a recap sheet is actually called the recapitulation sheet or something like that, but we all call it the recap. And it basically is a 4-page form that ends up in the front. You start from the back and you put in your expenditures, you put in your revenues, and then you culminate everything to the front page, which actually then produces what your tax rate is going to be. Myself and the assessor and the town clerk put a bunch of information into that thing. And then the Department of Revenue comes out and sits with us and make sure that we dotted all our T's and crossed all our I's, and they take that and they certify our tax rate.
And so where does the money for overlay come from? Where does it originate?
It's raised in taxes.
Pardon?
It's raised in taxes.
Oh, okay. So
it's an additional raise. It's actually on a line called other amounts to be raised, and it's raised. Basically what happens is you have your tax levy, and once you've certified your levy, Jonathan certified all his values, then as a resident or as a commercial industrial property, you can challenge his assessment. And obviously for a homeowner, if they challenge his assessment, it's, say it's wrong by, $10,000. And that's not a lot of money when it comes to the $650,000. But if you get a hotel who challenges his assessment, or a very large commercial building that challenges his assessment, and they tend to go to the appellate tax board. And if they end up getting $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, if they end up winning and getting a $50,000 or $60,000, $70,000 abatement, basically, that money has to come from somewhere. And so the overlay is an old term. It's actually called Allowance for Abatements and Exemptions, and that gets hit for the cost of that abatement. Because when you think about it, if everything was perfect and every single department spent every dime of their money that was allotted to them, and the levy was perfect and there was no difference of anything, if somebody got an abatement, there wouldn't be enough money to cover the budget. So therefore, this allowance basically is kind of an account held on to the side to cover those abatements and exemptions. All of the abatements for elderly, blind, veterans, the senior tax work-off program, all of those things come out of that. So it's not just abatements, but they're also exemptions. So all of those exemptions that people get on their tax bill come out of the overlay account as well.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
Paul, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed this. What's it based on? Is it based on what people have? How do we determine the amount to put aside to accrue?
That's the assessors come up, decide on that number. It's basically a number that's kind of stayed true. We've been using 650,000 for a number of years. It actually was $1 million a number of years ago, but we pared it down because what ended up happening is several years ago, the Department of Revenue decided that before that point, let me back up, before that point, a year was a year. So if you filed for an abatement in 2015, we had to have funds enough to cover the abatement in 2015. Several years ago, the Department of Revenue decided that it would be a good idea to commingle all the years. So therefore, because we would literally have to raise more money. So if you had extra money, say in 16, but you needed money in 15, you literally would have to raise it on the recap sheet. You'd have to raise it in taxes. So they decided to commingle them, put them all together, and therefore you can basically take it from one year to the other. It doesn't matter. On my books, I keep them separate because, well, I'm an accountant, so I like to do things like that. But the Department of Revenue allows you to commingle them. So that's.
So if it's cumulative like that, is it hard to determine how much we've over? I know you need to be conservative and something like that, but how much we've over, accrued, or is it? I don't know if you can do that because of those multiple years. Right,
and it's really difficult because of the fact that if we have besides your current fiscal year. So let's say, for instance, it's kind of confusing because the Department of Revenue says you cannot, you have to have enough overlay to cover your outstanding bills. So say, for instance, Leah Talbot's company owes $100,000 and I need to pay my bill. So there has to be enough money to cover my $100,000. But yet, if Leah Talbot's company decided to file for an abatement for $100,000, in order for me to file for an abatement, I have to pay my taxes. So therefore, I filed an abatement on $100,000, and there's a liability out there, but the Department of Revenue doesn't make you hold that money because I've already paid my taxes. So there's actually more of a liability when I file an abatement than there is when I don't pay my taxes, because when I don't pay my taxes, it gets liened on my property, and there's a remedy for that. So, but Jonathan does have a list of all of the abatements. Obviously, large commercial properties drive these numbers, and he has to have enough money to cover those abatements. It can take years to go through the appellate tax board, and you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the outcome is going to be. He does his work the best he can. He challenges, anyone that has an abatement, and the Board of Assessors rule on it. But again, usually for a large commercial tax base, they end up at the appellate tax board. And sometimes the numbers can be large, which is the reason why he has to have enough money in overlay to cover those liabilities.
Okay, Paul?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Melanie, and then we're going to move on to some other things. Melanie?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. And this may be an ignorant question, but I'm just curious. Because in this particular tax year, it appears that residential is taking such a hard hit. As a community, can you prohibit commercial properties from even filing an abatement for a year?
Absolutely not.
You can't. Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you. Okay, while we have the captive audience of Christy and Leah, are there any specific questions relative to the warrant that you would like answers to, so that we don't have to keep calling them back here, time and again, every time we look at the building warrant that we have in front of us? Does anybody have anything specific? Walter? Well, you're on mute, Walter.
That's okay. I'm better that way. Article 12, the local rapid recovery planning from the community development. Is that something that they're getting a grant for and we need to approve sort of the use of it, or is that just a thought up thing on their own to as a project, in other words, and that's more of a raise and appropriate thing?
No, so
it's just new, so. Yeah.
Right. So the LRRP was a process that we went through last year using a grant to identify some things that we could do downtown to revitalize the downtown and help businesses. And so they have actually applied for grants for these projects, but assuming, if they don't get them, they would still like to move forward. I will tell you, I don't even know if it made it out before. I originally had 3 projects and they were awarded a grant for 1. And so I'm not sure that anyone even saw that 3rd project on the warrant because they did receive the grant for that. So the intention is to use grant funding, but if not, they still like to move forward.
Thanks.
Hank?
And also just so you know, Zach Wagner, our economic development coordinator, is coming to the select board to talk about these on Tuesday night. So if you wanted to watch his presentation.
Okay.
Christy, when's the warrant close?
22nd.
Thank you.
Yep.
Christy, 2 quick questions from me. Articles 10 and 11, where we're looking to transfer some money to update the strategic plan and complete the assessment need. Do you have any idea of what that amount is going to be that you all are going to be asking for?
So the select board's going to talk about this on Tuesday night as well, but it could be about 50,000 for each article.
50,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the senior needs assessment is an initiative of the strategic plan. We haven't done that yet. And then the update to the strategic plan, that's what we're looking at. But that'll be part of their discussion also on Tuesday. So I'll follow up with you after that discussion.
Okay, hopefully they'll have been watching this. Some of them will have been watching this meeting and they understand our concerns about spending. I see you're silent.
Well, I mean,
No, it's okay.
I mean, it's proposed. It's proposed as a free cash.
Wasn't directed.
I know. That's why I was silent. But.
Free cash. Remember, free cash starts in our pockets, right?
Well, I mean, I know that we keep saying that, and I respect the fact that some of it comes. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Some of that comes from revenues. Yeah. Excess revenues. So. Just obviously those come from, fees or potentially state aid. I mean, there are many things that we estimate up until the time that the tax rate is set. So I fully respect what you're saying about free cash, but there are multiple sources that make up free cash.
Understood, but it's got to start somewhere. Okay, I'm not going to say any more. Any other questions for Christy and Leah?
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, ladies. Yes, thanks, Melanie. Thank you, ladies. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We go from one meeting to another, and it's a long day. So thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll speak with you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good evening. Okay, folks. Just briefly, Hank's point, I'm going to keep going back to it because I think he's absolutely right. And we've said this as a group before. It may be, we're going to have to address this more seriously in our message to the voters, this whole issue of what we're spending on. I don't know about you all, but I feel uncomfortable when I keep voting for things that I know we're going to have to spend money on, and then we have to turn around and say we got to stop our spending, reduce our spending, or be more judicious with our spending. So I don't know. Does anybody want to make a comment about the spending before we go further?
See,
Zafar, go ahead.
So the strategic planning, whatever we have decided or planned ahead for Westborough, it's a little out of reach. We all, from electric vehicles to everything else, we want it, and everybody jumps on this shiny new cars and new trucks and new something. I didn't want to say this, but even as a person, I buy used vehicle because if I can't afford it, I can't afford it. It's like a family. It's a family of Westborough. Yes, the things are needed, but if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. As simple as that. In terms of services, this is what we can afford. So maybe if we are looking for 100% service, if we get 97%, that's okay with me. If you can't afford 100% service, you can't afford 100% service, whether it's a police department or fire department or a school or anything else. And it just occurred to me that when we look at the budget, the school budget was $57 million, now it's 60. But that does not include the pensions and everything else we talked about. If we add up all this OPEB and the other benefits, that will be significantly higher. And I'm going to go and look back how the other towns report the school budget. Do they include all the numbers in the school budget? Because it has to be a fair comparison.
I'm actually going to be speaking with the superintendent and the finance director regarding we talked about it at the budget summit. Going to be talking a little more because they acknowledge they still owe us more information about what the cost per student is. But I am also going to ask for a copy of their report to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is what we report as a school system to the state, which I believe captures the costs that we've been talking about. And so we'll hopefully have more information for you.
Yeah, Michael, I'm fairly confident that the way the school presents the data on cost per student, when they're comparing us to other school districts, they're using data from the state, and the costs are on a comparable basis. Westborough's accounting is the same as every other town's accounting when it comes to dealing with capital expenditures and benefits and those sorts of things. They are not included in the school budget as the budget's presented. It's just a kind of we can argue whether we like that or not, but that's the way it's done. The numbers that the school's giving you, comparing us to other towns, are an apples to apples comparison. None of those numbers are all in. All of those numbers are budgeted operating spending.
I'm not suggesting that we're doing something inappropriate. Let's just get that off.
I understand it. But the numbers are comparable. We can keep digging, but the numbers are comparable.
Not necessarily, because the amounts of debt or benefits may be different in other towns, and especially when we have a lot of new schools. I would imagine our debt is a lot higher than a lot of towns.
The numbers do not purport to include the other spending. And what they're saying is this is what the operating budget spending is on a year-by-year basis.
Right.
So they are comparable. Okay, it has to do with staffing levels and class size and stuff like that.
Right, those are comparable, but there still are other expenses that go against.
Oh yeah, and we
they're
can
not
ask
necessarily the same across the board.
What you're going to find is that data is not available for other school systems.
Well, they said they had to report it on that year-end summary. Leah did, so it makes me think maybe it is available somewhere, but I don't know.
We'll find out. Let's
find it. Be my guest.
Yeah, let's not go crazy. If it's there, we'll find it. Okay.
Mike, I had a point to get back to your point, Zafir. Sorry but it kind of builds on that, and that is any one of these initiatives that we see. They sound great, and it's hard to say no to them. It's just the big picture that and that makes me start thinking like do something like just recommend a decrease of X% across the board of what's asked for. I don't know, but and then the professionals can figure out how to spend that. But, you know, by us nitpicking against small projects here and there, that's not going to have a huge impact, and it's also maybe not fair because they are good projects. I don't know. That's just my thinking too.
Yeah, we sometimes, as was said to me by one of the select board after the meeting on the during which the master plan was brought up, sometimes we do get ahead of our skis. And so anyway, Walter and then Melanie.
Yeah, I don't know how to say this very eloquently, but I'm taking a sort of contrarian point of view. I think to a large extent, we have a town meeting form of government. People have come and voted in for the services and programs they want. And all of a sudden, maybe that's what people want. And that's why we have elections of officials. That's why we have town meeting. But so far, people are saying, in a majority anyway, that they're willing to spend more to have additional resources. And so it isn't necessarily that, you know, you can just say, cut everything. And that's why I look more at value of things, and then everybody can decide whether that's a value for them or not.
Good point. Melanie?
I guess I'm piggybacking on everybody else, and I don't necessarily see it as nitpicking. I see it, you know, as it has a cumulative effect monetarily. You know, if you hadn't asked the question about Article, what was it, 10 and 11, that didn't have money associated, and then it comes up that it's $50,000 a pop, I think as individuals, we should think about how long it takes you to save $50,000. And for some people, it's, you know, a very long time. And, you know, 50,000 here, 50,000 there, we kind of dismiss it. And great, the services, you know, they sound great on paper, but we can't afford everything currently. So, you know, we got to figure out, we got to pick and choose. And it, you know, for some, it's not going to be comfortable, unfortunately.
Any other comments, questions, Safar?
You know, the issue I have is until I was in the master plan big meeting, we talked about doing this, and this, and people want, but everybody, including me, not so well informed about what is the tax consequence of what I want. If the way it is presented, this is what we want, will increase the tax by this amount, or the tax of this is this. And then people say, no, I don't want that. You know, I'm sure people are going to say that if suddenly we put a tax number next to it. Yes, you want it, but this will be the additional tax to this of what you want. A lot of people will going to pull back. That's all the change. Yes, it's a town form of government. Yes, people can choose, but let's give them the information. That's all I want. You know, it doesn't happen in 1 month or 1 year. You know, in the next 5 years, let's, you know, slowly develop a process where the people who decide should get the information, including the tax information of what they want.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, speaking of what services in general, the next order of business is the police staffing. And before we start that discussion, I will tell you of a phone conversation I had with the police chief on Friday and again on Monday. On Friday, since I am the liaison, I called the chief and thanked him for his presentation and said that we were going to be discussing this subject of staffing at the next AFC meeting. I asked him to think about it, think about his options over the weekend, and to call me back on Monday, which he did, and I was appreciative of that. And he asked that the proposal that's in place right now to fund these positions initially through ARPA stay in place. And so if the committee concurs, then we will not be asking to put these three positions back in the budget. But the committee still has their choice, or has the option, I should say, of since we are an independent body and we make recommendations to the town, to the voters, we can act as we see fit. So I'm going to leave that up to you folks and throw the floor open to discussion. Comments?
I want to make sure I completely understand. So they want to leave it on, and if it's funded by ARPA, perfect. But if not, they don't want it put in the budget?
He asked that it not be put in the budget, that he'd like to, just as you said, fund it by ARPA. And if it doesn't get ARPA funded, then the option left is, if we have time, to either put it into the budget or raise it on the town floor as an amendment or to the budget, or wait until next October to deal with this issue again.
It's kind of surprising, but.
Zafar?
So even if it's funded by ARPA this year, it's not going to pay the salaries and benefits for the subsequent years. Once you create a position, my philosophy is this: you don't want to one-time building cost can be funded by anything, that's okay. But a position which is salary, benefits, and everything for subsequent years, you should not be looking into it. It's good for him to come out back to you that way. The two things I would suggest: yes, if there's a dire need for these three positions, we should think about it. Can this be done by two? Can this be done by one? Something like that. It's a continuum of thinking process. How do we control this expending? So maybe if everybody agrees and we do the three, but next 5 years no more, something like that.
Well, anybody else? Any comments? Hank?
Yeah, let me come off mute. I mean, the chief, the discussion that's been going on, and we've been working on this for a couple of years. We did a staffing study a few years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And it became totally clear that we needed to increase the staffing in the police department over a period of time to bring it up to be comparable with other communities of similar size and similar demographics. So what we're trying to do is build the staffing up over a period of years. Whether we build it into the budget and take away the opportunity for the ARPA, if we try to build it into the budget, we're going to create a series of disturbances and get people focused on whether or not we ought to spend the money. What we really got to focus on is, do we need the people? Staffing study says we need the people. If they can't get the ARPA money, we can come back in October at the fall town meeting. We've done this before with other proposals of this sort, and we can do the staffing then. By the way, if you look at the staffing study, 3 is not the end of the staffing requirement. The staffing study called for additional ads over the next couple of years. So delaying the ad by 6 months is not going to prevent us from moving ahead. It's not going to turn Westborough into a crime haven, but it is going to let us get this budget through the town meeting. We cannot hit people with any more increases on this budget.
Walter?
Yeah, okay. I'm not muted. That's the first thing I'm checking. Okay.
You're not muted.
Yeah, okay. Great. I was convinced of the need for these positions, and I probably would have supported looking at putting that in. If the chief does not want us to do that at that time, I would not support putting him in at this time, and seeing where we get. And then, like Hank said, we can come back at the next meeting if we have to. Because ultimately, I respect his ability to run that department. And if he feels that's the way he wants to go, I'm with it.
And this is where we get to the fine line of, you know, where does our responsibility, you know, bleed over into operational issues. I kind of concur with Walter that if, you know, he's the person in charge, he was hired to do that job, and if this is his recommendation, I'm sure it's a well-considered judgment on his part, and I'm going to defer to that judgment. That's my personal opinion. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we will move on. One of the things we're going to have to do is to decide if we want to invite back or invite initially department heads or those who are sponsoring some of the articles on the warrant. And we should try to get to that over the next few days, next few meetings, because the warrant closes, what did Christie say, the 22nd of February. And then we'll just have a few meetings to vote on the articles. So what I would like to recommend is you've all had a chance to look at the warrant. If you have an interest in inviting back or inviting initially article proposers, please make your thinking known now. I do suggest that the schools, given the size or the percentage or the budget that the schools are responsible for, that we'll be inviting the school administrator and chair of the school committee, the school superintendent and chair of the school committee back to a subsequent meeting. So, thoughts about who you would like to see and why? Walter?
Certainly, I'm very interested in well, I can't say I'm interested, but I would be interested in learning more about all the zoning stuff in the back that was just added. Not particularly the ones for the chlorine tanks, but the Article 27, 28, there's zoning bylaws that are changing, something to do with signs again, and what's different now than before. And so that's certainly one that I'd be interested in.
Okay.
This is Paul. I'm the liaison for that, and I was going to suggest the same thing. I think they're complicated enough that, you know, by reading, sometimes you don't really get what's really happening there. So whatever makes sense as far as some alternate dates to give them, let me know, Mike or committee.
Yeah, I just want to see how many we have, and then we'll propose a calendar. Anyone else?
I may have others.
All right, please, go ahead.
I don't want to monopolize it, but I'd like to have the Affordable Housing Trust in.
Yes.
We have Hank here, but there's a couple of articles there on that. And I think we already talked about having them here.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good.
Do we feel a need to invite in DPW, fire, police?
I think I'm okay for now with them.
Okay. Anybody
I think we ought to at least go over there, have a brief encounter with them to just go through their capital and what they're doing. Because they're the big expenditures. I mean, if you don't deal with DPW, police, and fire, then 80% of your budget's just gone.
Well, we did just spend a day with them.
Right.
So I feel like we went through their budget and their capital. I'm not sure what is missing from what we did at the all-day summit.
Well, we clearly have lots of questions about the police department. How badly will they be hurt if they don't get their ARPA money?
Well, we got a chance to ask those actually at the meeting. So I don't have other questions.
Hey, whatever you guys want to do, I don't really care.
I agree that we had that whole day.
My inclination is what had to be said has been said. And we had the whole day with them. Plus, don't forget, we've had other meetings, where their information has been presented. But why don't we say we can at least reserve the right to invite them back and let it go at that for now. Anyone else?
Okay, so depending on how much we can learn by watching the select board meeting, there's, I don't know who you bring in for these things that are sponsored by the select board. Maybe it's Christie again or something, but if there are open questions after they go through those needs assessments and things. And then there's obviously the community development ones. And I believe there's a citizens petition that we should probably have those people in.
I would suggest on that not only do we invite the petitioners in, but we invite those in with if there's somebody out there with a contrary message to that particular article. I'd like to hear the other side of that story as well.
Mike, there was a committee who investigated that subject, and we ought to try and get whoever chaired that committee to come in and explain to us what their conclusions were and why we require a citizen's petition to deal with the issue.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks for the recommendation.
There's also, let's say, the Community Preservation Act. I don't know if we need more from them.
Anybody feel inclined to invite the CPA folks?
That will be a major contentious issue at the town meeting, and we should be prepared to recommend about it, and we should be prepared to address it in our remarks to the town meeting.
Do you?
I just saw that all presented again. Was that at the recent? Does anyone else know where I saw that? Was it the Board of the Select Board?
Yes, it was at the joint meeting we had with the Select Board 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So we just saw all that, right?
Yeah.
Again, if everybody but me is satisfied that they know everything they need to know about that to adequately defend it and make comments on it, it's fine with me.
Hank, if you're not satisfied, then we will.
No, I mean, I don't have any specific questions. It's just that this is one of the biggest initiatives to come before the town. And we probably ought to at least be in a position to say, yeah, we've been through all the details and we either support it or we don't, and make sure we understand how it will impact the voters.
It also, Hank, I think it allows more education on the subject for voters if they want to watch here, as well as give those proponents a chance to talk about it with people who are interested, I guess. So there's some value to that.
Well, we've got Tom. Wait, Tom, are you going to speak to this issue of CPA?
I would love to hear more from Chris or the other crew, but it's not a requirement on my end. I feel like we've heard from them a lot. I wouldn't poo-poo their showing up, but I'm not a huge advocate for it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it definitely requires more talk with or without them. I'm not sure, but the timing is just bad. I think I don't know. My personal opinion is that it's a good initiative, especially because we're foregoing funds that that are being collected from our people, our home buyers. But the timing is so bad that I'm afraid it might get voted down just because of that. And I don't know. That's something I think that I'm thinking about at least.
Well, look, why don't we invite them back? Let's get it out on the table again. Let's make sure we completely understand it. And then when the time comes for us to vote on that article, we will feel comfortable with whatever recommendation we make. So I will invite them back. Any other departments or proponents of particular articles that you can think of now? And the school department will also be invited. Well, if there are none you can think of now and you think of them later, we're not closing the door. What I'll do is I'll put these on a suggested calendar and circulate it to all of you before the next meeting. And we can get those folks, the liaisons, to make sure they reach out and invite them on that specific date. And if there's a need to rearrange it, we'll do it. Is that okay with everybody? Anybody contrary minded? Okay, moving on. Are there any liaison reports? Okay, hearing none, then let me use this particular part of the meeting to speak about the discussion with John Steinberg. You all had a chance to read those comments, John's response to the questions you all proposed. I had a very good discussion with him about each one of those things. But what I came away from the meeting with, and I thought it was clearly the right thing to do, is we seriously think about moving this a little farther back, because we won't have sufficient data to make a reasonable judgment on that question that we've all asked about the tax classifications. So clearly after the town meeting, we'll get our heads together again, figure out who we think we need to speak to, and then start covering that ground, and that'll give us a little more time and the assessor a little more time to gather what information will be helpful to us. Any concerns about that? Questions?
I just want to say I thought he did a great job filling in all the many questions and coming up with answers that were quite understandable.
And the data.
Yeah, and supply data at the end. It was very well done.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we will deal with this subsequent to the ATM. And then finally, under liaison, I'll just take a moment to talk about next Wednesday's meeting with the school committee. We have a draft agenda. A posting will go up either tomorrow or Monday. The whole idea behind this, it's worth reiterating, behind this retreat is to understand what each of our committees wrestles with, deals with, has to be concerned with, not just for, by what we think, but also by regulation, by mandate. For example, the school committee is mandated to do a number of things, and I know we're going to be speaking about that. What we don't want to do on Wednesday, folks, is take a dive deeply into the budget. It's not a budget meeting. It's a somebody described it to me as a bit philosophical. Yes, there is a bit of philosophical, whatever the word is, underlying this. It's a chance for us to get to understand what drives their thinking on financial matters, and for them to get to understand what is driving our thinking on financial matters, like spending, for example. So the format is going to be, we will probably start with an icebreaker. We'll have a very large, this, by the way, I should say, and it's an in-person meeting. There's no provision for remote or hybrid. We'll start with a general plenary type of discussion around a very large table, and then we will probably put some questions on the table and break into small discussion groups at other tables. We'll be mindful of the distancing. We'll have those discussions on that particular question, come back to the main table, hear what people have to say, and then put another question on the table. It is scheduled for 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. We will hopefully not need to stay until 10 o'clock, but that depends on how people feel about the subject matter and how long the discussions take. Both Kristen and I have talked about how we're going to manage the session, the retreat, and I think we're going to have we'll try to keep it moving in an efficient way, but at the same time, not lose the importance of things that are put on the table to discuss. And so I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are. Please bring your own snacks and drinks. We do not have, we haven't got the funds to spend on that. We have to watch our spending, and pennies make dollars. So any questions about what we're trying to do for Wednesday night? Are we clear?
Yeah.
Have I been clear? Yes, Melanie.
Will we have an idea of the questions ahead of time?
It's not a question. It's sorry, bad way to answer that. No, we're gonna present to them what we feel, and this is you as individuals, and we'll finalize things on Monday evening's meeting. But for example, I would like to discuss the question of value and what it really costs to educate, to the extent we can understand it, one of our students, and whether there is value in what's being done. So on Monday we'll finalize 2 or 3 major questions that we want to cover from our side, and they will do the same for theirs.
Got it.
Okay. My suggestion is you read if you haven't had a chance to read the part of the school budget, which speaks to goals and objectives and all of that. I think that will help frame some of the discussion that we're going to have. Any other questions or concerns? Paul?
That wasn't on the calendar, so I have to work that night. Is everybody else able to make? Is nobody else? Anyhow, there's certainly a quorum there, so it's a public meeting. How is it being recorded for the public and for me?
There will not be Westborough TV. It's a working retreat. The public.
So minutes.
Hang on a second. The public is certainly invited to come, but there is no provision for participation of the public, and the provision is participation by the committee members.
But how?
There'll have to be some minutes.
Hang on, that's been cleared by the town clerk, by the way.
There just has to be some form of minutes.
There will be minutes, yes. Yeah, Walter.
Also, I thought we were
slowly sinking into realizing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Paul.
I thought we were asked to submit questions, which I did, but apparently that's not part of this meeting. That's for the school administration.
No. You submitted some very, very good questions. And on Monday evening, I'm going to finalize all of this stuff with you. And so, you asked a couple of really good ones that we need to bring up to them. But I want to do it all at once on Monday night, and I'm trying to be respectful of your time this evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or concerns? Anybody disagree with what I'm proposing? Okay. I think we've pretty much covered the issue of future draft agendas. I will, as I said, send out a proposed calendar for our next meetings. We will meet Monday and then again on Wednesday, and we'll decide on Monday what we think about a meeting for Thursday. We've been invited to meet or to watch the select board meeting on Tuesday. It's going to be a week like last week. Any other concerns or questions? Comments?
May I ask a question about earlier in this meeting, or am I getting ahead of myself here?
No, go ahead, Andrew.
So when we were doing the voting for Christie's proposed or the recommended changes for the article for the OPEB policy, my phone audio cut out, and I put in the chat just as I was supposed to be voting that I voted yes. But I don't know how it was. I could see what was happening on the screen, but I don't know what was said or how my vote was taken. So may I inquire?
Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, Mike told us that you voted yes, so it was 8-0-0, and you're recorded as yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that, and yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. One other thing. It was suggested to me that we not vote on any of the articles until we have completed our interviews and the warrant is closed. How do you all feel about that?
Mike, there are a number of all the articles need to be voted on. There are a number of articles that we're quite confident will not be changed between now and when the warrant's closed, and we ought to just get through them and clean them up to save time.
Okay.
And the policy has been in the past that even after the warrant, if we decide we want to revote on an article after the warrant has closed because some things have changed, that we go do that, and the new vote goes into the book.
Okay. Any other comments about that?
I'm not sure. Well, I would like it at least, I don't know if you have to wait till it closes, but it was changing so quickly recently that I'm having trouble keeping up with the numbers and the changes that I would like at least have to have waited a week or so. So we got it a little more stable. I don't think it saves a huge amount of time because voting on the simple ones go very quick anyway. And as far as recording them all, it's actually a little easier for me if we tend to vote in clumps, not on 8 different meetings, but I'm okay either way. I just think in between last week and this week, the thing changed a lot. The numbers all shifted, and if recording them by their number and then they insert 2 in the middle, it gets very complicated for recording purposes.
Yeah. Speaking of changing articles, the warrant changing, I'm glad you brought that up, Walter, because earlier today, Christy asked me if we would be interested in putting in an article to replenish our reserve fund. We're down $85,000, and I get the snow and ice reports as Hank does, and at some point we might be asked to replenish the snow and ice budget. Hank, do you want to speak to that? Because I know it's one of the only budgets that can go into a deficit without an issue?
The DPW is allowed to overspend the budget if we're not able to cover it from the reserve fund. It then rolls into the tax rate for next year.
Okay, well, then I think it's probably a good idea if I let Christie know that we will be submitting an article to, sorry.
I mean, any article you submit that's voted on in the ATM in March becomes part of next year's tax rate anyway. You can't change this year's tax rate.
No,
It's done.
well, that's correct. But we still need to replenish, but we'll maybe,
Well, we have an article to set up a reserve fund for next year.
yeah, we do. But all right, let me confer with Christie on that and make sure we understand it. Go ahead.
It
Rob.
seems for the last bunch of years, we ended up the reserve fund going into free cash. And if what Hank says is that you could actually, the DPW could still plow the streets, and there's a way to resolve that without it coming out of an enhanced reserve fund. I'm not sure I'd be in favor of adding more to the reserve fund at this time, because I think there's a mechanism in place that acts like a reserve fund for the DPW.
Well, all right.
Because otherwise we're generating more free cash if they don't need it.
All right. Well,
But, I mean, it's worth looking into, but I don't think it's a slam dunk that just because we've spent some of that money that we want to go refill it.
well, we do want to make sure we have enough reserve to meet any contingencies between now and June 30.
Right. Which is only 5 months now, and we've already replaced furnaces. So
A lot can happen.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
you can
Well,
always
there's
have a
also the
special
concern
town
that-
meeting with a disaster.
There's always been the stated concern that if we have too much money, there may be people willing to bring forward bills and requests that they might not otherwise. Knowing that DPW is very much in that unique position where they can overspend and we could hedge them if we needed to, I would rather not over encumber ourselves to provide a potential target for other people to consider picking from.
Could you be a little more clear about that, Andrew? I'm sorry.
So when we have a full cash, people know that if they have bills or things that they need, and I'm not talking about furnaces, which is an emergency need, but in the past, people have brought us last minute requests, and it has worked against what we had in the budget that weighed against their interest in deciding whether or not they could bring requests to us.
Okay.
And I'm saying if we're up at 250, even if we do go down, that having more money in the account provides more of an opportunity for people to think that there are second level priorities that they may be able to bring forward because we have the extra cash at the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you. Any other concerns? Okay. Monday's going to be a little busy. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Moving on to the vote. Melanie?
If Melody's not there, can I jump
Voted
in?
with her legs.
Melody may have a prematurely adjourned. So I'll start with Bradley. Yes.
She's there. She is.
Or
Okay.
yes.
Okay. There you go.
Don't get it started without me. I'm always happy for adjournment.
Dolan, yes.
Paul?
Eagle, yes. Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Rouse, yes.
Yes.
Already, yes. Thank you, everyone.
0.
A robust discussion tonight.
Thank you, Westborough TV.
Thanks.
Thanks